Hello all! Rick here with a video attempting to explain how exactly the Changeling founders actually change shapes, and the answer took me all over the place, from looking into cephalopods to quantum probabilities and of course subspace shenanigans. We often hear the term morphogenic matrix in relation to the Changeling's ability to shapeshift, but what is this? On the surface level, it's used to describe the entire ability for a changeling form, as there is not an exact organ or simple part of a changeling that allows for this. In the same way that a holomatrix is the core programming for a standalone hologram, the morphogenic matrix could be considered the biological programming for a founder, from their thought to action. It is certainly a biological component to their anatomy, but the process it maintains goes beyond into the realms of quantum physics and chemistry. Their native telepathy existed within their form, and without a nervous system, this is how they controlled their bodies. Each cell contained the ability to receive telepathic commands from the mind of the changeling individually. However, the telepathy was limited by touch. Once separated from its body, these cells lost much of their functionality, but I'll get to that. The receptor for this form of manipulation was termed the morphogenic enzyme. When Odo was made solid as a punishment, it was through the deactivation of these enzymes, and as he showed no signs of degradation, we can also assume that these enzymes are the primary part that need refreshing when a changeling regenerates. Chameleons can change colour in their cells by altering the distance between pigment granules through factors like heat, hormones, and nervous impulses. Chromatophores of cephalopods are similar, in that multiple pigment sacs are expanded or contracted within a specialised cell to change colours. So, that part of changelings can be explained with real-world science at least. However, texture is a little different, as a changeling can not only mimic the look of a thing, but even the material itself. Some cephalopods can also do this by altering the polypi on their skin, creating bumps or spines, as, while not as varied as the sci-fi changeling, it's a start. A curveball to the changeling factor is that they emit no life signs when they are in the form of, say, a rock. Their texture and appearance is so accurate, even to scans, that they read as no different from a rock. Outside of nuclear transmutation, you can't change elements like this, which would require energy or radioactive decay, and biological processes would surely register as organic. These sorts of biological processes can be taken to the extreme and used to explain the shapeshifting abilities of the Antos, the chameleoid, and augment Suliban. Other species, such as 8472 or the Kelvins, utilised the incorporation of DNA to force cells to metamorphosis into different forms, but again, this is not what we observe with changelings. The first hint that we have something more complex going on here is that biology fails to explain it all. A changeling can alter their mass and weight, not simply their shape too. When Odo turns into a gull, he can fly as one. When he turns into a case, he can be carried weighing no more than you would expect. They don't simply leave the excess mass behind either, as they can adopt much larger forms and gain the mass needed. So, with their mass, where does it come from? Where does it go? Where does it come from? Tell me, Odo. Ronald Moore has stated before behind the scenes that he assumes that subspace, like always, is the answer. The idea he floated was that changelings do not eat or have any visible consumption of matter to add to their forms, so it must all be down to cell replication, and the energy needed to fuel it is drawn from a subspace layer. This extra energy is also diffused back into subspace when reduction in mass is needed, and changelings do have a limit as to the size and scale they can achieve when morphing. The Obsidian Order created a quantum stasis field emitter that countered the changeling ability to shapeshift, locking them in one form. This worked by locking the quantum state of the afflicted into a certainty and preventing any potential changes. The very fact that this works to limit a changeling suggests that their shapeshifting is more focused on quantum states and probabilities than organic changes, like a chameleon. Otherwise, they'd still be able to biologically change, even when under a stasis field, in the same way that they can still move, talk, and perceive. In delving into understanding this topic, the first thing I was confronted with is that you really cannot break down quantum mechanics into layman's terms without skewing the explanations, which sucks because I am most definitely a layman. What might begin as a biological process within a cell-like structure then must step into the realms of quantum probabilities, and I'm left with the only conclusion supported by what we see on screen. That is, that a changeling can consciously alter their molecules based not on chemical reaction or biological acts, but on the physics of the universe, and change their state at a whim. When they take the form of a rock, their molecules utilise the requisite energy and mass from subspace to change their very states into being rock. The final curveball I'm going to throw here is that some apocryphal sources cite that a changeling has no cell structure at all, and that even the cells themselves are first created at the whim of their morphogenic matrix, which is entirely possible. This means that in their liquid natural state, they are simply molecules of telepathically controlled potential, leaning far more heavily on the quantum mechanics side of their shapeshifting than any biological component. Samples taken from a changeling will revert to their liquid states, which then suggests that the totality and complexity of the morphogenic matrix lies within the majority mass of the changeling. Once removed, the smaller piece is unable to retain a connection to the matrix and returns to its liquid state, but does possess its own shapeshifting ability, usually only enough to allow it for locomotion back to the whole. In this way, early blood samples were taken to help identify changeling imposters, although it's likely changelings developed counters for this on their own. Additionally, if a changeling was rendered unconscious, they could retain their form, which suggests that their matrix did not require constant concentration on a conscious level. An analogy to think of is that people can still be tensed up even in their sleep. Changelings did have to return to their gelatinous state every 16 hours, with a few hours leeway, but this was extendable with years of practice, which is a big thing with them: practice. Odo was relatively inexperienced and could already do a lot, however his most obvious restriction was his lack of being able to create finer details, leading to his iconic look. This extends to beyond the humanoid form, as when told he made a rather convincing bird, he responded, "I doubt the gulls would agree." The more experience a shapeshifter has with adopting forms, the finer the details they can produce, and this is also probably why Odo lacked a sense of smell, as he simply did not have the acuity to replicate a functional olfactory system. If anything, this goes to show the level of mastery over their abilities proper Dominion infiltrators had, being able to replicate not only the external details of a person, but even the internals enough to fool scanners. We know that Odo, for example, would forego the forming of internal organs in his solid state as he did not need them, and he only wished to blend in enough. Changelings also must have some other form of sight or hearing, as shapeshifters retain a sense of their environment regardless of what form they're in. A practiced changeling could replicate an eye in all its detail to experience sight as a solid would. But I think there's more going on than this. After all, sight started as simple cells which could detect light, and if all the cells of a changeling were like this, they surely have enough of a form to see. Likewise, sounds are merely vibrations in the air, so if every cell of a changeling could detect vibration, then hearing would not be a problem either. While in humanoid form, however, it's probable that a changeling focuses their attention into the head of a body, as a large part of changeling philosophy is to try to truly experience existence in their chosen form, from being an idle pebble to a more complex moving organism. The downside is that it renders changelings more vulnerable to adopt such a form, as it limits their field of view, and in some instances, they can even be rendered unconscious by a blow to the head. Doing your best to replicate a humanoid form comes with the limits that imposes. A changeling's matrix and unique properties therefore rendered a changeling biologically immortal, as any cell damage that would be attributed to aging was moot when they could alter their structure at will. However, they were not invincible, and far from unkillable. Anything that disrupted their form enough was likely to prove fatal. For example, many were resistant to phaser fire, but even then, high enough power blasts could disintegrate or disrupt them enough to shatter their morphogenic matrix entirely. Certain radiations, electrocution, even extremes in the environment on their liquid state would be fatal. In conclusion, changelings are wibbly quantum chameleons who can control the states of their own matter and draw energy and mass from subspace pockets. No wonder they were regarded as incredible test subjects. Thanks for watching this breakdown of how changeling biology works. Until the next video, I've been Rick. Thanks again, and goodbye.